You know, I've been at this for a pretty long time, and one of the persistent myths that refuses to die, no matter how many times I talk about it and a few other people talk about it, and more to the point, people generally acknowledge that it is a myth, not real, a myth, is this idea of the traditional Eastern European wife that is going to treat you like a king as long as you support her, yada, yada, yada. Of course, it's a bunch of BS. So before I go into the meat and drink of the video, I want to first explain how this rose and why I realized I had to cover this yet again, because so many men are being deceived by this. Now, the other day I was passively involved in a conversation, and I was listening to a few gentlemen talk about how great it was, allegedly, in places like Ukraine, Russia, and Eastern Europe more broadly. And they had bought this myth hook, line, and sinker. They were not even in the slightest skeptical. Matter of fact, one had mentioned how he'd become engaged. And I didn't really intervene. You know, certain people don't want to be saved, as Coltrane pointed out in his recent video. People are there in the Matrix, they're in the Matrix, they're going to fight you. But I was listening passively. So let me just read off this snippet of this article, and it'll be posted on Lowbar, which gives you divorce rates by country in 2019. Many couples choose to express their love by tying the knot. Unfortunately, not all marriages last forever, and divorce is something that occurs in nations all around the world. We're going to take an in-depth look at divorce rates by country, breaking down the countries with the highest rates as well as the nations with the lowest rates. Determining divorce rates is typically performed by using census data. There are several different ways to use this data. For example, you can calculate the crude divorce rate. This simply looks at the number of divorced couples per year divided by the total population. This number is then multiplied by 1,000 and is expressed as a number per 1,000 people. So for example, if there are 100,000 people living in a nation and there are 500 divorces per year, working out this equation would show that there are 5 divorces per 1,000 residents. There are other ways to calculate divorce rates, but for the purposes of this article, we'll be comparing the crude divorce rate of different nations around the world. Looking at the crude divorce rate shows that Russia, let me repeat that Russia has the highest rate of divorce. Russia's divorce rate is 4.8 divorces per every 1,000 residents. Belarus trails only slightly behind with 4.1 divorces per 1,000 residents. And when it comes to the nation with the third highest divorce rate, there are 2 countries that are tied, Gibraltar and the United States. Each have a divorce rate of 3.2 divorces per every 1,000 residents. So right here, we have a perfect illustration of why this myth of Russian women in particular, but Eastern European women more broadly, is not founded in reality. That this continues to persist, and so many men buy into it, literally buy into it, spending money on Russian brides through the internet, all in hopes that this will somehow work out, is very dangerous. Now, it's not surprising that the United States has the third highest divorce rate. It's not a great place to be if you want to get married. But what should surprise a lot of these people who are adamant about proclaiming how Eastern Europe is the safe haven and how there are a lot of traditional women there, it's time to wake up to reality. And part of this reality is predicated on the simple fact that people in countries that are not particularly well off are going to be more desperate. They're going to be more engaged in trying to get out of economic hardship. And believe it or not, I know several Russians, Russia is not the best place to live. It might have some of the appearances of a first world country, but it's not really a first world country. Corruption abounds, there are a lot of issues, and a lot of people struggle. So when you see some attractive Russian female online claiming that she wants to be in a loving relationship, the best way to read that is she wants your money, quite literally. See oftentimes these Russian bride sites that sometimes include other Eastern European women, and how poor the English written there is, and how really what it's ultimately about is getting out of the unfortunate situation that they find themselves in. And so if as many men as I think are conflating this, conflate that with traditional and willing to stick by her husband, blah, 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 I think they're in for a real shock. Matter of fact, I've known several men during the course of my time on YouTube who have been in relationships with Russian women, Ukrainian women, and then married them only for it to end in divorce and disaster, with children in tow, mind you. So I do think this myth is incredibly harmful and pernicious, but I also know why it persists. And there are a few reasons. One of the reasons, which a lot of people don't talk about, for example, with these websites propping up so-called Russian brides, is there's some guy running it, obviously. and they're in on the scam. They have a relationship with the women who are working there, not an actual relationship, but by that I mean an understanding, and they know how to work it. They don't care who gets hurt in the process. They don't care who they're ripping off. They're willing to go through with that because it's lucrative. Get an attractive young Russian female, promise her something, give her part of the cut, one way or another, because most of these websites require that you register and pay money to do so, registration fees, etc., and there you go. However, the more dangerous component is ultimately men's gullibility, their vulnerability, and the fact that a lot of guys are just desperate as hell to find some kind of relationship. And in Western countries, this is typically a difficult thing. So they think, oh, I'll go to Eastern Europe. Oh, they're so beautiful. They're this, they're that. And though I hate to break it to them, they're in for a rude awakening. Now, ultimately, I'm not going to tell any man, individual or otherwise, whether or not he should get married. But I do think it's always important to have this information. I also think it's important that no man be deceived that there's some paradise lost found outside of, say, the United States or Canada or some other country that they need only travel to in order to find their dream woman who's traditional, who's going to care for them, yada, yada, blah-de-blah. That simply doesn't exist. Yes, there are some countries which will have lower divorce rates. It does not mean, however, they're going to luck out and find whatever it is you think you're looking for. And a final point to be made, one that I also need to drill home endlessly and repeatedly, is that women are creatures of their environment. They change in concert with what they're exposed to. The most famous example of this was this old YouTuber I used to know that I talked to a few times, who decided to piss off to the Philippines, never to return to the United States, settled down in some village with some local, had a few children, and runs a business from said town in the Philippines. Okay, you can do that. But he knew, and he told me, and we all know this, that had he brought her back to the United States, it would have been GG. And this is because women are reflections of their environment. They get new information, they talk to female friends, they begin learning the ropes, so to speak, and they will quickly, very quickly, develop a different attitude than the one that you thought she had. And this is something that men don't understand typically, that women are very, very changeable, they're very, very malleable, and they will change in reflection of their environment. What you see initially in environment A is not necessarily what you get in environment B. And that's another reason why men need to be very, very careful about these types of international relationships and marriages, and to the extent that they pursue them at all, proceed with extra care and caution. You never know exactly what's going to happen when you bring somebody from a foreign culture and environment to a new one, and that person happens to be a woman. Because you never know how she's going to react to a new culture and environment that is radically different from the old one you met her in. Remember, context is everything when it comes to women, gentlemen. Better to face reality than live in fantasy, as I always say. Gentlemen, as always, may the gods watch over you. Take care, and I'll check you out later. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.